Welcome to the Astrology Show with your host, Kelly Fox. Each week, Kelly will give you access to the current transits that are a valuable tool which provide astrological information to help unlock the potential each of us has through our sun sign. Understanding the current planetary influences each week can help steer us in the right direction to make better informed choices. Sometimes events in your life may seem completely random, but there is a pattern to the order of these events, one set in motion in part by you and in part by the planets and stars in the sky and their influence on your life here on Earth. So if you're wondering what's going to happen in your week ahead, if you're going to get that promotion, move to a new city, or fall in love, tune in to the Astrology Show for guidance. It can help you anticipate problems before they occur, give you tools to cope with changes, and help you look forward to the wonderful days ahead. Kelly Fox is a professional astrologer and internet pioneer who launched astrology.com, one of the first and most successful astrology websites. Today, her passion lies with her new site, theastrologer.com, where she brings a modern-day approach to an ancient wisdom. Please join Kelly each week to learn more about how the planets can align for you.
Hi there, and welcome to the Astrology Show. I am your host and astrologer, Kelly Fox. And on tonight's show, I'm going to be talking about the planets this month. Can you believe we are already into October? It's so hard to believe how fast 2018 is going. And it's been such a year. I couldn't really think of the word there to put in front of that, but it's been such a year. So much has happened, especially if you are a fixed sign. We have any planets in fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius. I'm talking to you. 2018 is a year of change and transformation. And so with October is a month for reflection and repair. And there's a lot going on. There always is. But the biggest news, I think, is Venus, planet of love and money, turning retrograde. Now, that's really big news, and I'm going to cover that in a lot of depth on tonight's show, because that is really the biggest news for October, is love and money planet Venus turning retrograde in Scorpio, and that's happening on October 5th, and that will continue all the way through November 16th. When Venus will finally turn direct in Libra. So Venus turns retrograde in Scorpio and continues its retrograde motion backwards into Libra. So that's the big news of October, which I will talk about in great detail on tonight's show. And also at the end of the show, I will give each sign their monthly horoscope and what to expect by sign for October. So without further ado, let me dive straight in because there is a lot to say. So with October, we're going to start off with a Mercury-Pluto square, which is not really good. It's not really a great beginning for a month, especially when we're looking down at a Venus retrograde at the end of the week. But Mercury-Pluto square, so it's about being obsessive, or fixed in opinions or dogmatic approaches, which will create clashes and tensions and in some ways a very tense atmosphere. So when you put together the very first week of October, we have issues around communication and people holding on to their opinions. That could really sort of not be a great start to the month. Some of us might be feeling that already. I'm just looking to see here, Mercury in Libra, and Pluto in Capricorn. So if you're a cardinal sign, Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, or have any planets in the cardinal signs, the first week of October, this first week of the month, might not be so great. Just be careful with what you dig up as well. Some of us might not want to see what we find. That's another approach. But typically it's sort of like when Mercury, communication planet Mercury, forms a challenging square to Pluto. It's very much about having to face the truth when we don't really want to. So on Friday, Friday the 5th, we have love planet Venus turning retrograde. Now, this is really big news because Venus is the planet that turns retrograde the least amount of times. So Venus is retrograde for the least amount of time out of all the other planets. Well, no, that didn't come out right. Venus turns retrograde the least amount of time. Let's just keep it at that instead of getting too technical. And, of course, we know, as astrologers, we know that the planets don't really move backwards. They just slow right down in their orbit around the sun, where they appear to be moving backwards from our perspective here on Earth. But really, it's just they've slowed right down in their orbit around the sun. So with Venus turning retrograde is probably the headline of October. Venus turning retrograde in Scorpio on October 5th. So this is definitely a time to rekindle old relationships, of course, if desired, or to finally address and confront and heal the issues remaining from a previous toxic relationship. Now, that's pretty interesting. And then also on the 8th, we have a new moon in Libra. And, of course, on the 9th, the day after, we have communication planet Mercury moving into Scorpio. So, right now we're in the season of Libra, and then we're going to be slowly moving into the season of Scorpio. So with this energy moving into Scorpio, it's like there will be tensions that arise, things that sort of come up from beneath the surface that many of us have to deal with, maybe conflicts with authority figures, dealing with rules and regulations. And then we have on October 12th, a very difficult, challenging square between the Sun and Pluto. So that is next Friday. So just be aware of that with power struggles. And then, of course, we have a bit of confusion around the 19th. I'm seeing here that Mercury does form a really nice trine to Neptune, but it's still not great for detail. And, of course, Mercury on that same day on the 19th is forming a square to Mars. So it seems like each Friday so far in October, the 5th, 12th and 19th, we've got some issues going on. A bit of power play, it seems, on a Friday, all getting ready for the weekend, of course. But, that aside, on the 19th, it's a good time for creativity or, tuning into our intuition. So then I'm looking through the final week of October. It really does bring the chance to heal from, the previous few weeks and if we've been caught up with these challenging aspects. And what we do have there is a full moon in Taurus, and that happens on the 24th. And so with the full moon in Taurus, it's sort of like the cycle, culminates, and it'll be a great time for seeking closure and repairing any sort of damage that's been done, the previous few weeks before that. And then, of course, the month ends with communication planet Mercury moving into adventurous Sagittarius or Sagittarius, the philosopher. And then, of course, love planet Venus, even though it's retrograde, it's moving into one of its favorite signs, moving backwards into Libra. So then we can face November with, even though Venus is retrograde, things sort of settle down in the relationship department at the end of the month. Because Venus turning retrograde in Scorpio, Venus doesn't really like being coupled with Scorpio. It does prefer to be coupled up with Libra. So even though it will be retrograde through November 16th, it's very much about things sort of settle down at the end of the month. So yeah, October definitely has its ups and downs for all of the signs. And again, if you are a fixed sign or you have any planets in fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, this Venus retrograde will be affecting you. And if you don't know where your natal planets are, go to my website, theastrologer.com/chartwheel, and get a free chart wheel. And each week on the show, you can follow along, because I'm typically talking about how the planets are affecting us. Usually it's the week. At the start of the month, it's the monthly planets, but usually it's every week. And, of course, I dedicate the shows each month to when the sun changes signs into whichever sign the sun is moving into. That is the show I dedicate to. And if you, I've got to look back at my calendar because I can't even think of when the sun moved into Libra. But if you missed last week's show, go to the OMTimes archive and have a listen, especially if you are a Libra. Then last week's show was dedicated to you and all your fellow Librans. So back to this month, and specifically this week, Venus, planet of love and money, is turning retrograde. So Venus turns retrograde at nearly 11 degrees Scorpio, and then it goes back into Libra on October 31st, and then on through November 16th. So Venus, the energy of the Venus retrograde, as I said, it's quite unusual, and it's not really a good time to get married or engaged or form any sort of commitment or make any sort of long-term purchase or make any sort of large purchase. But Venus retrograde, it does ground us, but it does put a damper on love and relationships. So, if you've been walking on clouds, you might find that you are crashing back to Earth during this period of when Venus is retrograde. So with Venus retrograde in Scorpio, we'll be examining the relationships and aesthetics that we would normally hide from all but a select trusted few people, maybe even ourselves. Maybe during this Venus retrograde period, many of us will be forced to look at ourselves, from a deeper point of view, or maybe confront something that we had sort of swept under the carpet for a very long time. Because it's in Scorpio, it's sort of like things will rise to the surface, and we really do need to deal with them. Around love and relationships is what this energy is all about. So, Venus retrograde teaches us that there is always the other side to love and beauty. It's facing some sort of ugliness, or, the opposite. Venus also rules, as all the astrological influences do, there's always a shadow side to everything. So, Venus is always known as the planet of love, but the shadow of that is hate. So it's ugliness and hate. So you've got love and beauty, and then, with this Venus retrograde, especially in Scorpio, it's bringing up ugliness and hatred. So we need to be very, very careful with that type of shadow energy rising to the surface during the next few weeks. It's very important that we know how to examine our darkest desires in some ways and how we compromise what we want. So it's sort of like, what is it that we're doing for the shadow side of this energy to sort of appear, and especially issues and relationships from the past reappear. So with Venus turning retrograde, the first aspect it will make is a square to Mars, and that's on October 10th. So that's really interesting because that complicates things. Mars is currently in Aquarius, and Mars has really been at battle throughout the past few months, specifically since May 15th. And as soon as Mars moved into Aquarius the first time around on May 15th, it formed this immediate square to Uranus in Taurus, who also changed signs, after 7 years on the same day, which was quite coincidental. And something in itself, because then throughout the Northern Hemisphere's summer, we had this battle between Mars and Uranus. And now, next week, October 10th, we've got Venus retrograde in Scorpio, forming this very challenging square to Mars in Aquarius. So again, if you are a fixed sign, or you have any planets in fixed signs, and that's Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, This not only Venus retrograde in Scorpio will be affecting you, but specifically around the 10th, relationship issues really come to a head at that time. I'm just looking to see what the degrees are here. Yes, 10 degrees for both. So if you have any planets in fixed signs at around 10 degrees, I'm talking to you. And so, Venus is the planet of love. Mars is the planet of passion. They're at odds with each other. Venus is retrograde. Venus is in a sign it doesn't particularly like. So we need to be careful with heightened desire, especially romantic and sexual desire, and particularly for people or situations we can't have. So it's like, if you have a big crush on a celebrity or any sort of unattainable ideal, this sort of friction, this sort of frustration may cause friction in a current relationship, with real life situations. So it's sort of like if you have these high ideals or you have these desires that can't be fulfilled, then the frustration will come out with this Venus retrograde forming a challenging square to passion planet Mars. But the interesting thing is, though, that, the Venus retrograde trines Mars a month later on November 9th. So, things will settle down because, Venus will be retrograde in Libra, and that really gets on with the passion planet Mars in Aquarius. So, with that in mind, it'd be like creating a feeling of being able to have anything we want simply by asking anytime Venus trines Mars in a really positive way like it will be doing now. Not 100% because Venus will be retrograde, but still much better than Venus forming a square to Mars on October 10th. So, and then Venus conjuncts Mercury, which means Venus sits right next to Mercury on October 15th. And so that's it's an opportunity to sort of like put a voice to what we've been feeling, even though, yes, Venus will be retrograde. It's like this may be a time, where someone writes a definitive news article or a song or a story that expresses how we are as a society and how we feel about our most personal relationships. And just keep remembering that, Venus retrograde in Scorpio, and I'm emphasizing the Scorpio, it's like things will rise to the surface from the past. And it might be issues around prior relationships or anything that happened in the past really does come to the surface right now. So this is a time, as I said in the very beginning, for like healing and transforming, because, Scorpio is the planet of transformation. It's a sign that's ruled by Pluto, the planet of transformation. And then, of course, we have the Venus. Oh, okay, I'm going to stop on that note. We're going to take a short break, but stay tuned because I have a lot more to say about Venus retrograde.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at OMTimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, Why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Hi there, welcome to the Astrology Show. I am your host and astrologer Kelly Fox, talking about the planets this month, and this month is October, if you can believe that. There's a lot going on. There's always a lot going on. I know, there's always a lot going on. But the big news, the headline of the month is Love Planet Venus is turning retrograde. And you thought Mercury retrograde was a kick in the pants. This is a bit more than that, because Venus is the planet that turns retrograde the least amount of time. Somehow when I say that, it doesn't sound right. But anyway, it's a big deal when Venus turns retrograde. So just before the break, I was talking about the connections and the mischievous that this Venus retrograde in Scorpio was going to get up to while it was retrograde. And I was just looking at the calendar again, and I see that Venus retrograde will conjunct or come together with the Sun the last week of October. So that's interesting because that makes it even more potent, both being in Scorpio. So, so again, it's, when Venus is retrograde, it brings to the surface dysfunction in a relationship or thwarted desires. And then the havoc continues into November, because I'll just give you just a quick overview, because I am only talking about October, but this is relevant because Venus does turn retrograde on October 5th, but then it continues through November. So when Venus moves into Libra, when it moves backwards into Libra, it'll be interesting, the first half of November, because Venus will be forming a wide square to Pluto and an opposition to Uranus. Now, I'm just looking again. As I say that, it doesn't sound so great, but it's like, yep, that's exactly what's happening. When Uranus, and again, this is November, this is not October, but it's all relevant because everything in astrology is about cycles, like with the planets in their orbit around the sun, it's always a cycle. Everything's a cycle. So that's why sometimes I can't just talk only about October. I have to sort of connect it into November, because, when Uranus moves retrograde into Aries for the final time in this cycle, that's November 6th, it will form this immediate opposition to Venus retrograde in Libra at the same time that Venus is forming this square, a very wide square to Pluto. So, I'm just thinking, what sort of positive spin can I put on that? But you know what, I might wait till you'll have to tune into the show, which will be about November. And that's probably going to be either October 29th or November 5th when I talk about November. I really need to sort of think about that one, because there's so much to say with what is going on with this Venus retrograde. It just seems to go on and on and on. So just moving on from the Venus retrograde, just making sure I've caught all the aspects to it. So that really is something to keep in the back of your mind, especially if you have any planets in fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius. Now, also in October, we have, on the 8th, we have a new moon in Libra. So that's very nice. Very nice because it's all, Libra is a sign of relationships. New moon is new beginnings. And of course, with the Venus retrograde very close to this new moon, The Venus retrograde is Friday, October 5th. The new moon is Monday, October 8th. And so it's all about relationships. Everything, the focus is all around relationships and new beginnings, but dealing with stuff from the past that's resurfacing and actually being able to work through it, and having this Libra new moon next week really help us sort of find new ways where, you know, it's a win-win, because Libra is the sign of balance. The scales is its symbol. So it's very much about, you know, our attention will be on our relationship issues, and that's, you know, business or romantic or even friendships. So cooperation will be vital to a harmonious life, of course. But with this energy, it's very much about finding the balance, cooperating, having everybody get something out of a situation, and really like considering the bonds that we have with others. And that's a really good word. It's a very good scorpionic word, you know, with Venus moving retrograde through Scorpio. So it's very much about, you know, the bonds that connect us with others. And, you know, with the Libra new moon on the 8th, it's like, well, are the connections ideal? You know, maybe compromise is at the heart of a peaceful coexistence. So it's like, you know, and we also, with all these influences, really, you know, all the time, it's not just everyone else. It's like we need to consider our own actions and who we are and what we bring to the table. And, like, are we being fair and reasonable with this Libra new moon of next week? And, you know, it might be time to address these kinds of questions this month, you know, and respect and love and trust that are generally earned. So how do we reinforce these things within our relationships, you know, and address balance issues if you're involved with an unequal association of any kind. And again, and that's romantic or business or friendships. You know, it's also a good time with being in the month of October is to surround ourselves with pleasing objects, you know, beautifying our life, however that may be. Any sort of creativity is very good with this type of influence. And then on October 9th, we have communication planet Mercury moving into Scorpio. So there we have Mercury and Venus in Scorpio throughout October. So under the influence of, you know, communication planet Mercury in Scorpio, you know, many of us will be seeking deeper meaning and core truths. And it's like with intense focus, we'll be digging beneath the surface to get to the bottom of something, and mentally clearing away meaningless data and uncovering, you know, what's really important. So intellectual intensity for October. Sometimes that can sort of turn into obsession. Some of us might latch onto an idea and sort of not let it go. And also the other side of this energy of Mercury and Scorpio during October is that many of us might be thinking a lot more suspiciously, even cynically during this time. And this is not a time to take people's words or ideas at face value. So it's sort of like we're all going to like dig beneath the surface and check, you know, with what's really going on. You know, and many of us might be drawn to the darker side of things now, you know, mysteries and thrillers and magic, etc. And sort of like longing to understand people's inner workings and motivations. It's a good time for psychology when Mercury is in Scorpio. And then, of course, on October 23rd, we've got the Sun moving into Scorpio. And so this is, again, it's sort of similar to Mercury in Scorpio. It's like we want to delve deep. We want to go deeper and get darker with the aspects of ourselves and our relationships. There won't be anything superficial, you know, as these planets are in Scorpio. So then we're going to have, you know, the Sun, Mercury, and Venus at the end of October in Scorpio. So it's a very deep time, I guess, very intense. And again, it all depends on where your natal planets are and how these influences are affecting your natal planets. But really, with the Sun, Mercury, and Venus retrograde in Scorpio, we will want to dive into the depths and uncover what has been hidden previously, more so with that Venus retrograde. Some of us might even seem mysterious to others at the end of the month. And, we might only want to reveal ourselves to those who have proven that they can be trusted. Now, trust is a really big word with a lot of meaning around it towards the end of October. Many of us will have really intense feelings. Some of us might even be afraid to scare people away if they see how passionate and extreme we really are. Another key word for this type of energy with Sun, Mercury, and Venus retrograde in Scorpio during October, it's going to be vulnerable. So if we're hiding our emotions, we might miss out on the intimacy that many of us might be longing for. Because remember, I said before, the key word here is bonding or bond with those that we really care about within our partnerships. So this is a time that's sort of like how much of ourselves do we reveal to really deepen and strengthen our bonds with somebody else. So it's about uncovering the hidden motivations or investigation and research. These are more keywords for this type of influence this month. And of course with, the Sun, Mercury, Venus in Scorpio, many of us will have the focus and willpower to complete any sort of project, and digging until we get to the root of an issue. And of course, we're going to be relentless in our pursuit of the truth, especially anything that's really been sort of pushed aside, and now we really need to get to the bottom of something. And this is a time for like healing old wounds and transforming a stagnant situation perhaps. But the key here, with this sort of very intense energy is to be willing to let go of the past and release anything that we've outgrown and forgive ourselves and others. And forgiveness is a really, it's a big word with this sort of energy as well. And then, on the 24th, we have full moon in Taurus. So that sort of brings things to a head. It's also a really good time for any sort of financial maneuvers. And, trusting our instincts when it comes to money and possessions and reaping some sort of benefit. But, the energy of the Taurian full moon on the 24th is a bit more chill. We've had all this really intense energy that's coming up throughout October. And even though full moons are typically like really intense, the energy of Taurus is definitely more chill than, the opposite sign of Scorpio, where the Sun, Mercury, and Venus will be through most of the month. So this is all about sort of, getting in touch with what's really important around the full moon on the 24th, and, sort of taking care of ourselves and appreciating in some ways the finer things in life around the 24th with this full moon. And then on October 30th, we have communication planet Mercury in Sagittarius. So this is very good for sort of broadening our worldview and exploring, a variety of subjects and looking at sort of new ideas and perspectives, especially of a philosophical nature, and, nitpicky details and facts and figures. It's not a really good time for that when Mercury is in Sagittarius at the end of the month and then through November. So it's about being optimistic and thinking through things where and having a belief that there's some sort of faith in a positive outcome, because Mercury, planet of the mind, when it comes together with Jupiter, the sign of the philosopher or the adventurer or the seeker, it's very much about having an optimistic sort of worldview. The other use for this energy is being a really good storyteller, because Sagittarius does have a sense of humor, and they're very good at holding a captivated audience through their storytelling when Mercury is in Sagittarius. And then on October 31st, we've got the Venus retrograde moving continuous retrograde or backward motion into Libra. So this is the time, October 31st through Well, I say November, but then there's some hard aspects to this retrograde Venus in Libra. But typically, when Venus is in Libra, it's all about being very sociable or social, and having gracious manners and charms and, a wide circle of friends. But just remember, when a planet is retrograde, the shadow side of the planet or the shadow energy does come out. So maybe people might not have such great manners typically than what they would, or people are not charming, or they think they might be when Venus moves into Libra when it's retrograde. So it's like this is a time usually for harmony, but it's going to be really interesting with the wide square to Pluto and the opposition from Uranus. Very, very interesting. I'm very curious to see how this is really going to play out, that's for sure. And typically we go out of our way to avoid conflict or confrontation when Venus is in Libra and we want to smooth things over. But with the retrograde, it might mean we're forced to deal with these things that we'd rather avoid. And normally with Venus in Libra, it's like we're really good at being diplomatic and being a really great negotiator. Many of us will be able to see both sides of the situation. And typically, with Venus in Libra, collaborative projects flow easily, especially if you're working on something that is from the past or something that you need to review or redo. Now, those RE words are they're usually with a retrograde planet. You might hear me saying them more often around Mercury, because Mercury does turn retrograde 3 times a year, whereas Venus turns retrograde once every 18 months or so. So, any words that start with RE are very good for any sort of retrograde energy. So with Venus moving back into Libra retrograde, then Venus in Libra is typically great for collaborative projects or working with someone else, because everybody gets along. Now, be very careful if you're working on a group project with other people when Venus is retrograde in Libra, because it might also mean that things that have been smoothed over suddenly come to the surface. So on that note, we're going to take a short break, and after the break, I'm going to give each sign their October horoscope, so stay tuned.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Looking for inspiration?
Want to be inspired?
Not sure where to go?
Find Mark and Kim every Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Inspired Living.
Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual.
Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
I can't believe he found them.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi there, and welcome back to the Astrology Show. I am your host and astrologer Kelly Fox, talking about the planets this month. And the big news is that we have love planet Venus turning retrograde throughout October and November, and it does make some challenging aspects to some other planets. So how will that be affecting your sign? Well, if you're in Aries, relationships and intimacy are your key focus during this month. There could be some potential conflict over your working life versus your personal life, which may be a recurring theme. So you may find yourself having to justify to your partner how much time you spend working. And then, of course, once Venus turns retrograde on October 5th, there might be some deep thinking that is needed about how to handle this sensitive matter. So try to approach it with an open and honest heart. And then, of course, the days between the 8th and 10th of October are likely to be your best opportunity to find a compromise with your sweetheart. And then the sweet Libra new moon, that occurs on the 8th, and then, of course, followed by the arrival of Mercury in Scorpio. So you'll be able to express your deepest feelings with sincerity and tenderness, but be prepared for initial resistance to your ideas, because we have this really tense square on the 12th. So it suggests that the powers that may be may prevent you from resolving this matter as you might have wished. But then later in October is a good time to share your dreams with your sweetheart if you can both work towards the same shared vision. Now that's the key, is to be aligned with your goals. And then on the 19th, we've got this really nice Mercury-Neptune trine. It's helpful, but it's also, you've got to be realistic at the same time. And then towards the end of October, the challenges sort of melt away. There's a really nice full moon on October 24th, so that helps you, Aries, to focus on what matters most to you. And then, of course, October 31st, we've got communication planet Mercury in your philosophy zone. That really does help to lighten the atmosphere, and many of us will need that going into November. Taurus, there are indications that this month you're not harnessing your ideas in a practical manner. So realism is going to be really important this month to you. And you are very much a grounded, sensible earth sign, but there are indications that this month you're not really sort of corralling your ideas in a practical manner as you usually would, which could lead to some sort of disappointment. And the Mercury-Pluto square on the 2nd highlights a particularly difficult instance of dreams and reality not quite matching up. But it's not all bad. Your ideas will get a practical boost on October 8th due to the Libra new moon, and then, of course, Mercury arriving in your love zone on the 9th. So that's going to be a big boost to help with your plans. And so October 19th, there could be some issues with authority, boss or a teacher, etc. But, don't let them drag you down. Timing is everything this month for you especially. So you really should know when to push ahead and when to hold back. And also with Venus turning retrograde, and Venus is your ruling planet, and it's turning retrograde in your love zone. This is going to be really interesting for you, Taurus. It's a good time to sort of reflect on happy memories and relive your happy memories from the past, of course. And if you're single, it's not really a good time for dating with Venus retrograde in your love zone. But the full moon in your own sign on the 24th is a really nice time for you to really sort of strengthen the close ties that you have with those special people. If you are a Gemini, this month your confidence levels are high, which is really good to see. But you need to know your limits, especially when it comes to risk-taking and especially any sort of financial risk. Definitely seek expert advice rather than relying on your own knowledge, especially this first week in October, and specifically October 2nd with the Mercury-Pluto square. And also take care of your health, Gemini, mental and physical this month. Make it a priority because when Venus turns retrograde in your health zone, you have a chance to rethink any unhealthy habits or negative self-talk. So this is a really great month for breaking a bad habit or getting any sort of therapy of any kind. Talking therapy is always good for an air sign. And then you'll enjoy any sort of artistic therapy or creative hobbies around the new moon on the 8th. But there is some very positive career-related news heading your way around the 19th, but there might be some strings attached with that. So just don't get too excited too quickly. Check all the facts first. And also know your limitations this month too. And then around the full moon on the 24th, that is in your health zone and encourages you to face any sort of anxieties you may have. And then, of course, on October 31st, communication planet Mercury arrives in your love zone, and you will be able to take on anything with a partner. If you're a Cancer, the crab, adopting a can-do approach this month will see you safely through the variable influences that are going on for you at this time. There could be some destabilizing moments, most likely involving conflict between yourself and maybe your in-laws or your partner or your blood family. These will come to a head on October 2nd or sometime this week because of this very difficult Mercury-Pluto square that's going on the 2nd. So be careful about putting up barriers to any sort of communication. And again on the 12th, because, you know, we've got that Sun square Pluto, so be really careful with that, and staying calm will definitely help. And a positive and diplomatic new moon on the 8th will help you find a truce. So it won't be long-lasting, thankfully. And so, you know, the emphasis this month for you, Cancer, is on your creative talents. And Venus turns retrograde in your creative zone. So it's a time to sort of review or go back to something you did in the past that you really enjoyed, maybe a hobby or a craft of some kind. But you may face some blocks around the 19th, maybe a lack of resources rather than time or money. But, you know, just keep plugging away because things will improve, especially when the sun moves into your creative zone on October 23rd. So there's a lot of positivity. And then October draws to a close with a helpful full moon on the 24th in your social zone. So seek friends at the end of the month who can really rally around and support you. Leo, success in October is all about getting your message across, so being clear in what you want to say and saying it well. So be careful with some conflict with colleagues. There could be some tensions around this first week of October where your words could be used against you with this Mercury-Pluto square, and then maybe again on October 12th when the Sun squares Pluto. But don't get into any sort of power plays. So communication is really key this month at work, at home. You know, Venus will turn retrograde in your family zone on October 5th all the way through November. So it's a good time to sort of look back at family history and to heal any sort of rifts from the past. And a positive new moon in your communication zone on October 8th helps you to reach out to others, and especially, you know, distant family members as well. Definitely a time for reconciliation. But, you know, October for everyone is a bit of a bag of mixed messages, but for you it's really more around the family. And then towards the end of the month, your career comes back into focus with an ambitious full moon on October 24th. So positive career news is on the way. Virgo, managing your resources properly, and that's both time and money, is essential as October gets underway. Be careful this week with that Mercury-Pluto square on the 2nd. If someone is not demanding far too much from you, don't feel guilty about saying no. And with the Venus turning retrograde, you'll benefit from peace, quiet, and privacy rather than, you know, being out there socially. And then the new moon is in your money zone on the 8th, so that's promising. And then Mercury in your communication zone, it's a good time to sort of speak up and promote your own talents. But, make sure that you stick to your budget. And be careful on the 12th when the Sun squares Pluto with power plays. And if you're taking new steps in your business or career, don't forget to keep communicating. So be clear about where you're heading Be careful around October 19th. There could be some mixed messages, but there are exciting times ahead around the full moon on the 24th, which activates the travel zone of your chart. Libra. October this year is all about recognizing your inherent talents and abilities and making the most of them. So don't be surprised if you start the month feeling a little bit insecure. That difficult Mercury-Pluto square on the 2nd highlights maybe a fragile self-esteem. And then Venus turning retrograde shortly after that in your resources zone might make you doubt whether you have what it takes. And don't rely on family members this month. There's something that's coming up, maybe some jealous comment, which might cut you deeply. But, you know, the good news is there's a new moon in your own sign on October 8th. And so this brings greater courage, which helps you to discover talents and abilities you could better use. So maybe it's time to start thinking about how your talents could contribute to your income. And, you know, just be careful, you know, around the 19th. With a bit of confusion, but the full moon on the 24th does sort of bring everything to a head in a positive way. Spend the final week of October making plans to showcase your abilities. And Scorpio, let me see what's going on for you. You know, this is actually a time to think about where you're at spiritually. And how far along your spiritual journey you really are, and what should you be doing next. You know, and this first week of October might prompt you to do some soul searching. And then when Venus turns retrograde in your sign, you may be questioning your own spiritual values. The new moon on the 8th, again, is all about spirituality, so new beginnings around you know, increasing your intuition and your spiritual practices. And then towards the middle of the month, you know, you might come into some conflict with others, you know, with that hard Sun square Pluto on October 12th. So just try to avoid any sort of power play. But of course, the Sun will arrive in your sign on the 23rd through November. So that brings a lot of really good energy your way. And then, you know, the full moon in your love zone on the 24th, that's really great news as well. Sagittarius, you might, you know, being expected or required to fit in causes you some angst this month. And of course, you always much prefer to go your own way. Watch out for conflict on October 2nd and 12th. You know, this might be when your desire for freedom and individuality conflict with what society or work or your partner requires of you. You might also need some more privacy than usual. And that's because, you know, Venus is turning retrograde in your privacy zone. But, you know, October is really a month of clarity for you and sort of getting really clear about your ideas and goals. And, you know, looking at the broader vision of where you're going. And then late October is a time for reflection and more solitude. And again, it's about spirituality at the end of the month and then through November. And then once Mercury arrives in your own sign on October 31st, you know, that'll help you feel revitalized and clear-headed. Capricorn, get set for some hard-working October, which should see lots of progress being made towards your professional and personal goals. So that's really great news. But don't expect those goals to remain set in stone, of course. There's always a state of flux, especially this month, you know, with lots of some heavy planetary activity, around, you know, particularly around the 2nd and the 12th. You know, Venus turning retrograde in the big picture area of your chart. So, you know, there's lots of brainstorming and thinking to be done at this time. And then the new moon in your ambition zone on October 8th, so all about new beginnings around your strategies. And, you know, just know that the full moon on the 24th is in your risk zone. So you might have to make some sort of choice between like a safe option or a riskier one. And Aquarius, October looks set to be a very educational month for you. And that's because, you know, you might have had some self-doubt or nagging feeling, but just be really careful October 2nd and 12th, you know, with that Pluto squaring up to Mercury and the Sun. So there might be some psychological obstacles that you need to overcome. But the new moon falls in your education zone on October 8th. So this is really promising if you're looking to go back to school or increase any sort of skill set that you had, or that you have, I mean. And around the 19th of October, expect some good career-related news. So that's a really good sign there. And then towards the end of the month, you know, confidence starts building again when the sun shifts into your career zone. But there might be some little bit of doing stuff from the past around career with that Venus turning retrograde. And finally, Pisces, October brings mixed fortunes for you. The month could begin sort of very difficult, in a very difficult way because of that 10th square between Mercury and Pluto. So difficult relationships may feel like they become impossible under this influence. And anything illicit is likely to be brought out into the open, and again around the 12th with the sun forming a square to Pluto. So be scrupulously honest in any dealings that you have at this time, and really protect yourself. And with the new moon on October 8th, it might help you take a more objective view of any sort of situation. And travel's going to be important this month for you as well. You know, that's going to be really important for broadening your horizons. So make the effort to get out and about, even if it's only locally. It'll help really to sort of clear your mind. And then the sun arriving in your exploration zone on October 23rd makes it doubly important that you come out of your comfort zone and see some new things. Well, that's it from me. This is the Astrology Show. I'm your host and astrologer, Kelly Fox. Thanks for joining me, and be sure to tune in next week.